Hello, everyone. Good morning from California. I want to welcome you all to our webinar, Monetization of the Customer Journey, presented by Milestone and Google. While we wait for the last-minute attendees, here's a few quick notes. We have muted everyone to avoid any audio disturbance during the webinar. However, if you find you have any questions as we go through the presentation, please feel free to ask them using GoToWebinar's chat box. There's no need to wait until the end of the webinar. Just go ahead and ask your questions. We can address them during our Q&A section. If time's running tight, we can answer any remaining questions on our blog. Additionally, this webinar is being recorded so that we can give you access to a version of the presentation that you can share with your teams later on. So look for that later this week. And without further delay, let's meet the people we have on the call today. My name's Jake Brennan. I'm from Milestone's Santa Clara office, and I'll be your webinar moderator. And today I'm fortunate to have with me here in person two guests. First, we have Ann Payne, market specialist from Google. She brings 10 years of media strategy and marketing experience. Prior to joining Google 4.5 years ago, Ann worked at Martha Stewart Living, Omnimedia, and Pandora Radio. And next up, we have Walter Poliska, Milestone's VP of Marketing. Walter brings more than 25 years of experience in sales and marketing for enterprise software to Milestone. He oversees our marketing organization and is responsible for both our product marketing and demand generation functions. So for those of you who are new to our webinars, Milestone is a leading provider of digital marketing software and services for hospitality, retail, and finance. We provide a full range of solutions, including website and mobile design, content creation, SEO, analytics, and competitive intelligence. Our best-in-class technology and solutions drive revenue and ROI for clients across the globe. We've done business with over 2,000 companies, including leading hotel chains, major retailers, financial services companies. Milestone has garnered over 300 awards and a reputation for blending outstanding design with advanced technological capabilities. So without further ado, Walter's going to start us off with an overview of what we're going to discuss today.
Excellent. Thank you, Jake. And thank you, Ann, for participating today and helping us out with this webinar. As Jake mentioned, today we're going to be talking about the customer journey, and specifically we're going to be relating it to Google's moments of the customer journey, and specifically we're going to break it down into 4 specific moments. 1, the dream moments, how consumers start their travel plans, what they do when they first plan for travel. 2nd, the planning moment, the role of mobile in the planning process, and how consumers find the places that they want to stay during their customer journey. Then we'll go into the booking moments and talk about how what the data says in the booking moments, and how customers book their properties and their stays, and most importantly, how you can get the most out of that particular part of the experience. And then finally, we'll talk about the experience moments. So this is what happens after the consumer has already booked their stay with their hotel, and how you can take advantage of that experience. And then finally, we'll have some key takeaways for you at the end of the webinar to talk about some of the key actions that you should be looking for. Throughout this whole process, Ann is going to be talking about it from the perspective of Google and some of the research data that they've done and some of the insights that they see. I will cover a little bit more some of the key strategies and key takeaways that you can get from each particular moment, and some examples of how some of our customers have taken advantage of these situations in the past. So at this point, without further ado, let me give it over to Ann. And Ann, maybe you can start by telling us a little bit about the moments and what they mean for our customers.
Of course. So thank you to Jake, and thank you to Walter and the whole Milestone team for having me today. I'm really excited to dive into some of the latest research. To pause here, really at the heart of Google is our pursuit to connect users to exactly what they're looking for. At the same time, we're working to help marketers find the right places across the entire Google ecosystem to create and capture demand, or create and capture intent. So I want to start with a chart that really illustrates this share of intent. So what we're looking at is the combined average share of intent for the top hotel brands across accommodation-related search queries. One example here, for instance, is in the plan moment. These top-tier advertisers have an average share of intent of 30%. In other words, appearing about 1 in 3 opportunities. So as you can see, there's actually significant missed opportunity when it comes to actually capturing consumer intent across this journey. And it's happening across all devices, but as you'll find throughout this presentation, mobile, it tends to be especially true for mobile, that we're really missing out on that share of intent on mobile. And then as Walter and I go through this consumer journey, I want you to really think about your own brand's share of intent and if you're there in these particular moments. And then Walter, of course, will focus on some of these key strategies that allow you to earn some of that consideration or more of that intent throughout the journey. Let's get started with the first phase. This is dream. This is very early on when you're there to inspire. So starting with one particular statistic, in these dream moments, actually 1 in 3 travelers say they haven't even decided on a specific destination. And in fact, 82% of travelers don't even have a specific hotel brand in mind. So this is a huge opportunity for you already. As they're embarking on this inspiration phase, you can actually get in front of them and prime them with your hotel brand. Throughout this entire webinar, I'm actually going to be referring to some of the research that we've done with Luth, and this is clickstream data. So what you're looking at here is actually, this is a real consumer. This is Liam, and it's looking at, over the course of his planning process, all the way from inspiration to booking, what are some of these digital touch points that occur. And I think I'll just sort of pause for a second on each one of these as we go through them, because it will give you guys just a good understanding of what these individual consumers are doing. So the profile of Liam, he's 30 years old, and he's not just planning 1 trip, he's actually planning 3 trips, one of which is his own destination wedding. So let's take a look at some of Liam's travel moments. Over the course of this 4 months of planning, there's actually been 7,000 digital travel touch points. That's pretty crazy. 534 of them have been Google searches. And this is something that I really want to call out. 1,400 images across Google Street View, Maps, and other image views. And we're going to talk about the importance of images a little bit later on. Okay, lastly, for this section, I do want to hone in on the fact that most travelers are more likely to book with a brand that actually provides utility or provides relevant information to the destination that they're interested in. So again, this is your chance to really shine and come in and provide that utility, provide that relevant information on the destination. I'm going to pause there, and I actually want to bring it back to Walter. And Walter, kind of keeping in mind just in the stream phase, some of these trends, I really want to know the strategies that Milestone has in place to connect marketers to customers.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anne. In this particular phase of the customer journey, probably the most important takeaway for our customers is to really focus on non-branded searches, to focus on becoming part of the story. As consumers search for information on Google search and through all of the various ways they're going to be interacting with the web, they're not going to be looking for specific property names. They're going to be searching for keywords and queries that are associated to what they want to do, to the vacation that they're planning, to the wedding that they're planning, not necessarily to a specific property. In this example, for instance, we're seeing a property that's actually ranking for a search term that's related to Harvard University in Boston, Massachusetts. And because of the outstanding content that they have on their website, not only are they actually showing up in the search results, the only 3 domains that are ahead of them in the search results are .edu domains. And they're actually ranking ahead of Wikipedia, which, as everybody knows, is one of the most reliable sources of information on the web and always gets very highly ranked. If we dive a little bit deeper into this particular success story, we also see that this particular property is also ranking very highly for a lot of different types of queries, many of which are question type queries. So they're not only ranking for keyword-based searches, they're also ranking for the questions like, where is Harvard University located? These are questions that typically are originating from mobile devices. Oftentimes they may be coming from voice search queries. As we all know, voice search is becoming a much bigger part of the search ecosystem, and is something that is really a huge opportunity for hospitality customers, especially, to really start ranking for. So really the main story for Milestone customers here is focus on the experience, focus on what customers are searching for, and really try and rank in that early part of the customer journey, so that you can get into the stream of consciousness of the consumer while they're looking for the destination, not necessarily when they're ready to book. So at this point, as the customer starts to shift into the planning part of the customer journey, what are some of Google's sort of findings in that particular part of the journey?
Of course. So at this point in the journey, someone's chosen their destination, and that dreaming starts to become a reality. And at this point, too, I can say that a lot of the queries that we see are really around destination-based search queries. So honeymoon destinations, European destinations are common search queries that we see on Google. And while these searches are happening across all screens, actually more of these searches are actually occurring on mobile devices. And you'll find throughout this entire plan phase, mobile really does play a crucial role. In fact, we can say that actually 70% of travelers that have a smartphone are actually doing their travel research on their smartphone. I mentioned earlier I would talk a little about the importance of imagery. So one thing that we found with the destinations page on Google is that the most engaged elements on this page is the main photo from the destination. And actually, travelers are looking at, on average, 10 images on a particular destination. What does this mean for you as a marketer? Really, basically providing that beautiful imagery, highlighting the experiences, your experiences that you provide with images throughout this entire journey, this entire process, because you'll see images play such a crucial role when it comes to booking travel. So coming back to mobile, and as I said, I would focus, a lot of this plan phase really is focused on mobile. Actually, 1 in 3 of mobile travelers say they've actually discovered a new travel company on their mobile device. And this is actually rings true even more so with the millennial audience. And half of millennials have discovered or have said that they've discovered a new travel brand, a new hotel brand when searching on their mobile device. Bringing it back to the Luth research that we've done, this is a different consumer and her actual path to purchase. So this is Gina. She's a middle-aged woman, and she's traveling from Nevada to San Diego for a mother's conference, actually. So her visit is actually both business and pleasure. She's looking for fun things to do with her children in Southern California. So again, over the course of her 3-month research process, about a quarter of these touch points, quarter of these digital touch points are happening on mobile. Again, huge amount of digital touch points, 850, with 166 Google searches. And one thing to look at, especially in all these loose examples, is such a small percentage of these touch points are actually occurring on your hotel brand's site. So in other words, there's so much information gathering that's occurring before the consumer even comes to your site or in between. So Walter, you know, I kind of want to understand what your strategic takeaways are in this particular moment.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anne. Really, when looking at the planning moments for Milestone customers, the strategic takeaway is, number one, saturate your presence on local channels with a consistent UNAP, URL, name, address, phone number. That's really your identity on the web. It's your digital identity, if you will. As customers are doing the planning stage, as they're researching properties, as they're finding the types of properties that they're interested in staying in, making sure that your contact information is always consistent, always accurate, always maximized, always on point is really critical. The second key takeaway from a strategy standpoint is to make sure, kind of as Anne alluded to, that you use photos to their maximum opportunity. So upload photos on your website and cross-promote to the local channels, places like GMB, Yelp, TripAdvisor, Facebook. Really get that information across about not just your property, but the surrounding area of the property, what there is that is going to entice these millennials that are relying so much on image searches, and all of these consumers that are using their mobile devices and they're looking at these pictures of these locations, and get them to actually engage with your property through the use of imagery. A success story that we can share about this type of a strategy, and especially from the perspective of a consistent UNAP and having consistent sort of digital information presence across the web, is some work that we've done with one of our Fortune 500 customers. We've been working with them for about the last 6 months, and over the course of that time period, they've seen a 43% of ranking on the Google 3-pack, simply by ensuring that they have consistent UNAP information across all of the various places where their information is accessible. So really making sure that as consumers are finding your information, making sure that as they're exposed to your property, making sure that your phone number is always on point, making sure that your name and your URL information is always on point is really critical, because that information can get out of date very quickly. It's not just because of mistakes that you may have made that information often gets out of date. There are a number of different data providers that oftentimes, without necessarily trying to pollute data out on the internet. So it's always important to have someone that can help you maintain a very clean, consistent digital presence on the web. So we've talked a little bit about the consumer and essentially how they identify the places that they want to stay. That's essentially where we've gotten at this point. What is some of the data and that Google has with regards to the booking moment, the part that really a lot of the folks that are listening to us today are really care the most about? What is some of the data that you guys have found on that part of the customer journey?
Of course. Yep. So the destination has been explored. The research has been done. It's time to book. What does this look like? So as much that's being done on mobile in terms of researching, and as much as mobile bookings has grown, funny enough, the majority of travelers are actually still booking on a desktop or a laptop. Amongst leisure travelers, almost all of them are switching between desktop and between mobile and their desktop devices as they plan or book a trip. And actually 46%, so half of travelers with smartphones, actually say that they could make their decision on mobile, but then they're actually going to book. In other words, they're completing that conversion on on a desktop device. Why is this happening? With Google, we've discovered there's two primary reasons this is happening. One is the anxiety factor. In other words, from a mobile booking standpoint, the consumer is wondering, what if I mess something up? And then secondly are the limitations of mobile booking sites and apps, which we'll get into. But this stat says it all, right? 70% of business travelers, of leisure travelers worry that they're not finding the best price or making the best decision. This is that anxiety factor. Now, getting into another huge reason is this experience is not frictionless on mobile. So half of leisure travelers and the vast majority of business travelers are saying due to mobile limitations, they're actually booking on a different device. What does that mean? I mean, as travelers are switching devices, you are constantly at risk of losing your customer to competitors. And actually 88% of mobile travelers said if you as a hotel brand don't provide them with a good mobile experience, they're actually going to switch to a completely different site. They're probably going to go to your competitors. I want to call out something specific that mobile has done to basically change user behavior when it comes to booking hotel rooms. We've seen that basically 85% of non-branded hotel searches on Google related to today or tonight actually occur on mobile devices. So we'll get into it more, but mobile is really creating this more spontaneous consumer that's willing to book last-minute hotel rooms. Getting into the Luth research here. This is Kendra. She's a mother of 3, and she travels for both business and pleasure. In a 5-month period, she's actually planned trips to Amarillo and Caraville, Texas, and is exploring destination vacations or vacation destinations in San Antonio, Whistler, and Puerto Rico. So I want to take a look at Kendra's travel moments over the past 5 months. Again, we're seeing a huge amount of digital travel touch points, 700 over 5 months, 52 Google searches. And actually, this is one that I really like to highlight is that Kendra's considered 8 different accommodation brands prior to booking. So, Walter, given this kind of new way of booking, what are some of the strategic takeaways from Milestone?
Absolutely. Great question. Probably from, there's lots of things that we could talk about from the booking moment from Milestone's perspective, but the one that I want to highlight today is really maximizing the traffic that you generated as a hotel. You've done the hard work. You made sure that you were present during that dream phase when consumers were still trying to understand what they wanted to do with their free time. You've gone one step further. You've made sure that you were consistently available, that your information was accurate across the web, that when people saw the great images of your property when they were searching online with their mobile devices. And through all of that hard work, maybe you even had some branded advertising, some PPC campaigns that drove people directly to your booking engine from their Google searches. So you've done all this hard work, you've spent all this money to get them to your site, and then it turns out that as many as 75% of those users that start a booking process will actually abandon it and will leave the site. 40% of those typically leave because they're not convinced that they're ready to book yet for whatever number of reasons. 35% of them are still price shopping, going back to that statistic that Ann pointed to earlier about people being sort of weary about and unsure about whether they're actually getting the best deal or not. However, it turns out that 30% of these people would actually return the same day if only given the opportunity, and as many as 50% of them would return the same week if given the opportunity. So really the strategic takeaway here is about maximizing traffic, and one of the best ways to do that is through revenue recovery or shopping cart abandonment, depending on whose terminology you want to use. There are really 3 core ways of implementing revenue recovery. One is to capture and complete visitor transactions when they're starting that transaction. So the user is in your booking engine, they start putting in their name, first name, last name, they put in their email address, and then they abandon. There's actually ways to actually capture that information so you can then follow up with them later on with offers to try and bring them back to convert that transaction that was not completed. The other strategy you can take is to identify what's known as an exit intent, meaning you can actually identify through technology that the user is about to leave your booking page. And you can actually provide incentives on a desktop site, especially through the form of things like pop-ups where you can say, hey, don't leave yet. Here's perhaps some free Wi-Fi that we're going to include into your hotel stay to try and get them to actually convert. And then the last one is giving users the ability to come back and complete the transaction later. So giving them the ability to get an email reminder that says, hey, Walter, you started this transaction about 3 days ago. You told us to remind you to come back and complete the transaction. So here's your friendly reminder, and perhaps here's an offer with, again, some additional benefits to try and get me to complete that transaction. How well does this work? You see a couple of quick case studies here that we've done over the last few months. Both 2-month campaigns, one a resort area, recovered almost $33,000 in revenue across 18 bookings, a return on investment over 127 to 1. The other one, a hotel, almost $16,000 in recovered transactions, 13 bookings and a 62 to 1 return on investment. So obviously a huge payoff for a very small upfront investment for hoteliers to really maximize that traffic that you've worked so hard to get to your website. So at this point, and we've gone through the hard work as a hospitality company. We've gotten people to actually book with us. What does the research say from the perspective of what I should do or what customers customers are looking for more than what I should do. What are customers looking for once they're actually completed with that transaction?
So actually, the hard work isn't over, and that this is the experience moment, which once they're actually on property or experiencing your brand, it's a moment you might not think about, but you should. Why is this? So actually 9 out of 10 travelers expect you, the hotel brand, to actually share relevant information while they're on the trip. And why should you care about this? Because the vast majority of travelers will actually feel more loyal towards you as a brand if you do provide this utility while they're on their trip and experiencing it. I want to get back into mobile and how it does really change the customer experience while they're on your property. Again, mobile leads to more spontaneous behavior. So what we actually see is that travelers that are on your property, we've seen a 30% increase year on year. So from Q1 of last year to Q1 of this year, 30% increase in queries while users or while travelers are at your hotel properties. And that actually, and this doesn't apply to me because I'm a planner, but 85% of leisure travelers are actually deciding on these activities once they've landed at your destination. So a lot of wiggle room there to get in front of consumers. Yep, great. And then speaking specifically to how can you help these travelers explore the destination? So a lot of these leisure travelers are actually, they want to visit new places. Half of these leisure travelers are inspired to go to a place they've never been, while a very small share, only 18%, actually plan to revisit places they've been. So again, this is your opportunity to really tap into local knowledge, provide some utility, because these travelers are probably experiencing this property or this destination for the first time. This is my last example from the loose research that we've done, the clickstream data. This is Brooke. She is a 35-year-old mom, and she's also a marathon runner. Brooke's traveled recently from Tennessee to her alma mater in Baton Rouge, and she's there with her family to actually run a marathon. So we can obviously tell Brooke is a mom because, and also a marathon runner, because 100% of these touch points are occurring on mobile. She probably doesn't have time to sit down on her desktop computer and search for ideas. So this is an area, right, where there's huge opportunity across mobile with these types of consumers. Pretty quick in terms of the number of digital touch points that occur over these 2 weeks. So we're only seeing 40 digital touch points, 17 Google search interactions. And interestingly enough, one thing that I like to point out in this particular consumer's journey is she does leverage YouTube. So clearly whether it's the destination that's provide videos or whether it's the hotel brand, but she is watching video to make this decision. And on that note, again, I want to bring it back to Walter and really understand, how you help your brands shape this experience for customers.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anne. For Milestone customers, I think really the number one strategic takeaway is to sell the experience. Hopefully one of the things that's come across through the course of this webinar already, I think there are two major themes that I'm seeing. One is, we've said mobile probably at least, a couple of hundred times already by now. But the other part is that throughout this process, we've really kind of been touching on the fact that customers aren't necessarily looking for a place per se to stay or a city to visit. They're looking for an experience. They're looking for something to do. They're looking for a vacation spot where they can enjoy themselves. So as a hospitality company, one of the best ways that you can take advantage of this experience moment, if you will, is to provide a portal where consumers can get an understanding of what there is to do that's available around them, both as far as things like in-hotel amenities, as this example from one of our customers is showing, perhaps nightlife that people can take advantage of around the property, nearby restaurants and shopping, even things, for example, things like things to do, whether it's hiking, whether it's tourist attractions that you can engage in. So really providing that interaction with that consumer that says, hey, I'm not here just to provide you a place to stay. I'm also here to give you information about how you can get the best experience possible to start building that brand loyalty from these consumers, so that the next time they want to come back to that destination, they're going to remember, hey, this place that I stayed at really was helpful in helping me get the most out of my experience. And a success story in this particular case, to dive a little bit deeper into the data, over the course of just a few months, you can see almost 4,000 unique views in this particular case for this sort of content that was provided for these customers, a 3-minute average time on site. So people are actually visiting the site, they're staying on the site for quite a bit of time, they're actually engaging with the content, almost 5,000 page views. So really a very successful engagement for consumers to look at what's happening in the particular area and what there is to do in that particular area. So until now, we've talked about all of the various phases of these moments and how they apply to the customer journey and how hoteliers can take advantage of them throughout the customer journey. As Jake alluded to at the beginning of the presentation, I've spent almost 3 decades in the enterprise software industry, especially a lot of it in the business intelligence world. And as people say in the business intelligence community, you can't change that which you do not measure. And measuring your success throughout your customer journey is probably one of the biggest challenges that a lot of marketers face across pretty much any industry, but especially in the hospitality industry. At Milestone, we've actually recently just launched a new customer journey planning tool that's part of our analytics product that allows you to actually see how your digital marketing experience is being impacted as you work through it. So in this particular example, we're going to drill down on what we call the awareness stage. So this is most closely associated to those dream moments that we talked about at the beginning of the process. In this particular example, what they're seeing is that of all the impressions that they're seeing for the dream moment part of the customer journey, almost 20% of them, 18-some-odd% of them, are actually coming from social media. As this particular Milestone customer drills down further into this data, they see that roughly, we can't see the numbers there, we would have to hover over Facebook and Twitter, but we see that roughly probably about 80 or 90% of those impressions are coming from Facebook versus Twitter. Why is this important? Well, let's make an assumption that as a marketer, I'm spending 60 or 70% of my marketing dollars on Facebook and the other 30 or 40% on Twitter. When I see this type of data, obviously that doesn't match up with what I'm investing. So maybe I need to reevaluate what my marketing mix is. Maybe I need to reevaluate my messaging on Twitter because it's not quite working. The point is, I now have a tool available to me as a marketer to be able to measure the output of and the outcome of my campaign so I can optimize my digital spend across the customer journey. So at this point, and maybe we can kind of talk a little bit about key takeaways for the webinar that we've discussed so far. So from your perspective, what do you think are some of the key takeaways for our hospitality customers from the conversations we've had today?
Certainly. So at this point, you all have learned that you have to earn and re-earn each person's consideration in the moments they experience throughout this journey. I want to bring it back to this chart that we looked at the beginning of the webinar. And this share of intent by moment is truly a simple measure of success. It's basically saying or asking, are you there or are you not for your customer? It's a number of times you're there for searches in a given moment. And we found, in conjunction with some research that we've done with Forrester, is that moment-ready brands, in other words, hotel brands that truly look at intent and build their share of intent across these moments, see a significantly stronger ROI in their overall marketing investment. Bringing it back into the overall sort of mobile trends that we've seen. We're clearly seeing mobile share of travel site visits increase, and it's increased to 40%. But we've seen this decrease in times per session. In other words, a 5% decrease in time spent on your site, on your mobile site specifically. However, we've seen this uptick in conversion rates. So what is this all saying? What's the takeaway from this specifically? We can infer from this data that people are really doing their travel planning more and more in these tiny micro moments, or in these small moments fractured across sessions, and they're doing it on their phones. On a final note, we've talked a lot about how travelers are leveraging their smartphones in this searching phase, in the planning phase, and we haven't really paid close attention to whether they're actually booking on their smartphones. And they are. In a nutshell, we're seeing about a third of leisure travelers have actually booked travel on their smartphone, and half of business travelers have actually booked travel on their smartphone. So don't take mobile out of the equation when it comes to the actual ultimate conversion, because it is there still, even though we talked about it as playing a bigger role in the planning and research phase.
Thank you, Anne, for that. Very interesting takeaways from that Google perspective. From the Milestone perspective, I kind of want to talk about it from, first of all, the strategic component. So from the strategy component, first in the dream phase, as kind of we alluded to at the beginning of the presentation, first and foremost, think destinations, don't necessarily think branding at this particular part of the stage. Customers are looking for to be inspired at this point of their journey, not necessarily to book. In the planning stage, it's all about mobile. Mobile is the present, not the future. So make sure that you've got a strong mobile presence. Make sure that when people find your information, that it's consistent, that it's accurate. Make sure that you're using imagery correctly and pervasively to make sure that you're maximizing the opportunity. In the booking phase, focus on conversions. You've done all of this hard work. You've spent this money to try and get people to your site. Use the tools that are available to you, whether it's things like revenue recovery, whether it's techniques like conversion rate optimization, to really maximize that conversion on your website and get the highest ROI possible. And then last but certainly not least, wrapping it up and sort of bringing it back, if you will, to the beginning about the total experience and leveraging tools like guest portals to provide that optimal experience for your guests so that they really feel like they're fulfilling their dream that they started planning when they first started on this journey. From a technology perspective, really three big takeaways. The first one is we talked a lot about mobile. That was one of the themes that you've heard throughout the course of this presentation. And with regards to mobile, the future of mobile is AMP technology. So it's very critical for hospitality companies to make sure that they have a strong mobile presence and that they're investing in technologies like Google AMP pages to make sure that you're providing the fastest experience, the most optimal experience for your consumers. From a marketing perspective, think omnichannel and invest in omnichannel strategies. Now, what do we mean by omnichannel? What we're really talking about is not thinking about each one of these moments that we talked about in each stage of the customer journey as a silo. So don't think about it from the perspective of what do I need to do from a marketing perspective in this particular phase of the journey, and then how is that different from another phase of the journey, but approach it from a holistic perspective to look at the entire customer journey with a message that is overarching, that is then planned and carefully executed across all the various aspects of the customer journey. And then finally, you can't change that which you do not measure. From a technology perspective, having a good handle on the analytics of what's working, what's not working, what needs to be adjusted. This is a very complex, very intricate process that needs to take place. You're going to need to measure in order to be able to optimize your experience. So at this point, I think we can open up for questions. Jake, any questions?
All right, Walter, thanks very much. Everybody, this is our opportunity to have a conversation with Walter and Anne, so don't be shy. If you didn't ask any questions during the presentation, just go ahead and type them in now, and we'll get around to them. We have about 20 minutes left in the hour, so if at any point we hit a lull, we'll just we'll call it there. And so make sure you get in your questions. We want to be able to get to everything that you guys have to ask. So first question, regarding the dream phase, should I only focus on organic search? One viewer asks.
Excellent question, Jake. This kind of touches back, at least, my perspective, maybe, Anne, then you can give your perspective on this question. From my perspective, I think what's important is kind of what I just touched on about omnichannel. You really have to think about all of the examples that we gave, whether it was during the dream phase, whether it was during the plan, the booking phase, all of the examples that we touched on, all of the examples that we gave were examples of one particular strategy that was implemented during that particular stage of the planning of the process for that customer. there are many aspects, many strategies that you can deploy across all of these various stages. The most important thing to do is to touch base with your Milestone strategist, touch base with your the people that work with you at Milestone to really put together the most effective strategies that make sense for you for all of the particular moments that you're going to be involved in. And any take from your side?
Yeah, I think that's why I really like those examples from Luth that we included of those 4 different profiles. And going back to Liam, who was there at the beginning in the dream phase and what he was going through, with his clickstream data, we saw that just in the dream phase, there was about 3,000 digital touch points. And those definitely weren't all just organic search. He was everywhere. And I think the primary, he spent a lot of time looking at images, looking at Google Street View, looking at the actual hotel brand site, whatever it may be. So I think, to Walter's point, there's a ton of touch points that happen throughout this process, or throughout this particular phase of the journey. And the point is to be omnipresent as a brand.
Okay, great. Any more questions out there, folks? We're still waiting on some questions to roll in. If we don't get any more, Walter, do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have, as Jake just alluded to, please, let us know your questions. But one additional huge announcement that we want to make today, those of you that have visited the Milestone website before and that have probably heard from Milestone know that our Engage conference is coming up in July, on July 17th and 18th to be exact.
That's right.
And actually, we have given that I have Ann here from Google, would like to make a very important announcement. Ann, who from Google is going to be participating at the Milestone conference?
Yes, actually, our head of industry for travel will be presenting. So we're pretty excited to have her come and join. Absolutely.
I'm thrilled about that. I'm very excited. So we have some, it's a huge opportunity. I'm excited to go to my first one. I wasn't there for the one last year. I hadn't joined Milestone yet, but from what I've heard, they're very educational conferences with a lot of great content. We have 11 sessions focused on the customer journey. So a lot of what we talked about here today, you're going to hear again, but we're going to go into a lot more depth, and you're going to get an even bigger perspective from the Google folks, specifically around the hospitality channel.
All right. And one viewer asks, where is the conference? The conference is going to be in Chicago, Illinois, at the Hyatt Regency.
So contact your account manager and contact your salesperson, and they'll be happy to give you more instructions on the conference and what it entails and all the details.
And by the way, if you register sooner than later, we do have a deal that will take $100 off the ticket price. So definitely register sooner than later.
Excellent point, Jake. Thank you for that.
All right. And it looks like we don't have any more questions coming in, so I guess we were extra thorough today. Thanks again, Ann, for coming, and thank you, Walter. And if you do end up having some questions later on, oh, whoops, I should have asked that while I had everybody on the line, then please, you can email us at marketing@milestoneinternet.com. That's marketing@milestoneinternet.com, and we will be happy to answer any questions that you have. And without anything else, I think that's it. Thanks a lot for joining us today, folks. Have a good day.
Thank you, everybody.